This episode of Bright Hearth is brought to you by Backwards Planning Financial, Squirrelly Joe's Coffee, Rooted Pines Homestead, Indigo Sundry Soap Company, Live Oak Integrative Health, A Well-Worn Story, Grey Toad Tallow, Reformation Heritage Books, and by our supporters at patreon.com.
But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such thing there is no law. Galatians 5:22 through 23.
There is, said Michael, if thou well observe, the rule of not too much, by temperance taught, in what thou eatst and drinkst, seeking from thence due nourishment, not gluttonous delight, till many years over thy head return. So mayest thou live, till like ripe fruit thou drop into thy mother's lap, or be with ease, gathered, not harshly plucked, for death mature. Excerpt from Paradise Lost by John Milton. Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bright Hearth here. You're joining us in the evening time reading room of the Sauvé household with the beautiful, lovely, gentle and quiet, virtuous woman herself, Lexy Sauvé. Lexy, say hi to the listeners.
Hello, listeners.
She thought that I was saying...
I thought you said breeding room, but I'm pretty sure you said reading room.
Reading room. Oh my God. The
laughed.
Ammunition we're giving to everybody.
I'm sorry. I'm reading this note that I'm supposed to have read already for this.
Oh, okay. I see.
Out of the corner of my ear.
Yeah, the corner of your ear.
I thought reading room.
You know, every time already that I say to the guys
just
in the
move
office.
On. I know okay.
That tonight we got to record Bright Hearth. They all look at me and they go, "Sure you do.
Mm-hmm.
Sure you do. We know what that means." And I say to them every time, like, guys, no, we really have to actually record an episode of Bright Hearth.
We're being self-controlled.
Sure you do. Sure you do.
It's just because of how busy our evenings are.
Yeah.
Not even like family stuff, but just making sure we're home to actually record. Even.
Yeah, like get here in these chairs before, at a decent hour. So welcome back, everybody, to our reading room, where we read books and also Bright Hearth podcast. And today we are continuing, we're picking up in a thread that we started not last episode, but the one before, when we talked about fortitude. Fortitude is one of the cardinal virtues, which is a set of 4 virtues of goodness, of character that you'll find in both Christian thought, but also older thought than the first century. You'll find it in classical Western thought as well. These virtues come from the Latin word cardo, which means hinge. And so these are like the virtues that hinge, that life hinges on, like whether you are living the good life or the wicked life. So these are virtues that are discussed all over the place. Aristotle discusses them, Stoic philosophy, Cicero, Plato discuss these. But also, as you see often in the Christian tradition, the church fathers and some of the most influential theologians in the history of the church also pick up on a lot of the threads from Greek philosophy and Roman thought, and also show how Christianity perfects, sometimes corrects, but also perfects these virtues that the pagans were groping towards without the light of the gospel, and shows how they weren't completely wrong. They actually did have real insight. They had the light of nature. They had the light of reason still. And so you see Augustine and Aquinas and Ambrose and others talk about these virtues, as well as some of the directly biblical themes of like the 7, if you've heard of the 7 deadly sins. In many lists in church history, those sins are actually set across from 7 virtues. And so temperance appears quite a bit in those, and that is the topic that we're talking about today. It is the virtue of temperance.
I think Galatians even has right before that, the opening passage that we chose, there's a whole list of things to put off.
Yes.
Before he says what to put on. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So this is how the scriptures think about virtue. Mm-hmm. You're putting something on, you are taking something off. So we talked about fortitude, one of the cardinal virtues. We're going to talk about temperance, which appears in the KJV translation of the fruits of the Spirit that Lexi read. It's very closely related to self-control, and so it's opposite. If you look at classical lists of virtue and vice, even in church thought, you'll often see temperance set across from gluttony. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So it might be helpful to start by just defining what it is when we're talking about temperance, because it's not a word that you actually hear that often. Have you heard this word used?
I've heard
much?
it used as names more than like people using it as a word in conversation.
It's like a prophet, it's a hope. When you name your kid Temperance, you're like, man, I really hope that this is a self-controlled, which you hope for all of your kids, but especially you don't want them to be ironically named Temperance and then have no temperance. Temperance is used as it's basically the idea of self-restraint. A person who has temperance is a person who restrains themselves from some desire that they might have that is inordinate or out of balance. So sometimes that can refer to a desire that is good, but which can go out of its banks, like a river that can water the crops, or it can flood and destroy the city. So hunger and eating, I mean, this in a very basic level is an issue that requires temperance. Mm-hmm. Things like often if you read classical sources that are discussing temperance, they'll talk about mercy related to temperance, mercy and revenge, where revenge is a kind of untempered zeal, sometimes for something good, like the righting of a wrong, but where temperance would come in and restrain the desire for seeking revenge. And obviously, when we read the New Testament, we find that we are not to, and the Old as well, we're not to seek vengeance for ourselves, but leave vengeance to God, as well as to leave justice to his ministers of justice, the civil magistrates.
I wonder if that's why meekness and temperance are together then.
Yes, very much. Similar concepts like controlling your spirit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Controlling your desire. You'll see temperance talked about related to wealth and the use of money often, like the category of luxury. An intemperate man is a man or a woman who splurges on every desire that they have. And there's no desire that they don't satisfy immediately at whatever expense and however much debt they have to go into. And I think it's just a very good word. It's one of those words that I think we need to bring back and teach our children the classical virtue of temperance, because we're talking in this season about truth, goodness, and beauty. This is another episode you can put under that goodness category. And so why don't we start maybe by let's work through some of these different categories where temperance is needed and how they relate, because obviously this is Bright Hearth. We're going to talk about how these relate particularly to the Christian home and the productive Christian household, to marriage, to parenting. Babe, when you think about temperance as it relates to your work as a homemaker, let me start here with a question for you that I didn't tell you I was going to ask you, because I wanted to get your cold, hard thoughts on this one. And really, it's just the question, when you think about your duties as a homemaker, what are some areas where a homemaker is tempted towards intemperateness or requires temperance?
I would just say like the management of time is probably a huge one. Time and resources. Management of time and resources, being deployed to either love people well or love themselves well. Yeah,
give us some examples. What do you like? That's a good one. What does that look like practically?
So with time, I think it means being able to account for every moment, even if it is like I took a nap for 2 hours today, or, we watched a movie with the family or something. I'm not saying every single moment has to be productive,
right?
With like a very specific end means in sight, but that you're not just like that you're being proactive about using it as a resource, I guess, instead of passively not really stewarding it or reining it in, I guess.
Like flitting from desire to desire.
Yes.
Oh, I'm gonna look at my phone for a little bit. Oh, I'm going to go do my...
I just don't feel good today. I didn't get much sleep last night. Well, the reality is you're not going to get much sleep most of your adult life. So if you're living by those passions constantly and you're not learning the self-discipline of like, I remember when I was a young mom, Nancy Wilson's advice of productivity keeps the spirits up. That really helped me so much on days when I just felt like laying on the couch all day, either sickness or tiredness, but just like not letting those physical bodily passions control what I was doing with my day And we have one of our kids that we do get to a point with him where we tell him, like, just because you are hungry, you may not tell us again. Like,
keep it to yourself.
Yeah, because you have to get to a place where, because for a kid as a teenager, that translates into like sexual impulses. You can't just do whatever you want, get whatever you want because your body tells you that.
Yeah.
Like, we understand that with sexuality, but we don't necessarily apply it all the time to other places.
Yeah.
But you really need to understand that same impulse when it comes to riding your emotions and your energy levels. And
yeah, that's a really good application. I actually want to camp out there for a second because you mentioned something. I think it really got me thinking when I first started considering an episode on temperance. What really spurred my imagination was actually seeing it set classically opposite gluttony. Because I was thinking of intemperance in how many different categories it applies to, like sexual temperance, like chastity is temperance applied to sexual desire is a good way of thinking about it. I was thinking of temperance in regards to wrath, like not being an angry person, but having temperance in your emotional self-control. I was thinking of those things, but then to see like how rigorously or often it's applied in its history of its use to opposite gluttony was really interesting to me, because I started to realize, oh, that is the perfect application of this virtue. And where we see it fail so often is in just self-control with our food, self-control with
Matthew Henry defines it as moderate use of meat, drink, and other enjoyments. So he doesn't even really bring it into a lot like more of that classical realm, I guess.
Yeah, he's just directly talking about our appetites.
Yeah, that would be another. So then you can think in terms of like emotional appetite, sexual appetite, physical appetite, all that stuff. So.
Hey friends, let's talk about Gray Toad Tallow. They're a family-owned small business dedicated to making products that nourish your skin with the purest, most wholesome ingredients. For centuries, people have experienced the moisturizing and healing properties of tallow, and Gray Toad Tallow is committed to sharing these benefits their family has experienced with you. Besides their commitment to offering you a healthy skincare option for your family, Gray Toad Tallow's desire is to remain affordable and accessible to be a blessing to others. For more information and to try a balm sample pack, visit graytoadtallow.com. That link will be in the description along with this code, which we would urge you not to forget to use for 15% off your order. That code is all caps, BRIGHT15, BRIGHT15 for 15% off your order, and we truly appreciate your business. Are you tired of not feeling well and of having your doctor treat your symptoms without taking the time to investigate what's really going on? Rebecca Belch owns Live Oak Integrative Health and is passionate about helping women and families achieve the health that God designed our bodies to have. She has been a critical care and labor and delivery nurse for 20 years and is a licensed practitioner of functional medicine. Her goal is to address the root causes of dysfunction in your body and to help you give your body what it needs so that you can create a legacy of health that extends to your children and grandchildren. She provides a wide range of testing options to uncover your underlying health issues, such as fatigue, weight gain, and gut problems. She then works with you to develop a plan that focuses on nutrition, hormone balance, and long-term habits to promote enduring health. She also specializes in health for women who will become or currently are pregnant. This time is often overlooked and is the most important window to create generational health. Contact her right now for a $50 discount on any of her service options. You can do this on her website, liveoakintegrativehealth.com, and that link will be in the description for you. If you have a young family like me, you work hard every day to ensure you care for your wife and kids. Providing for a young family is challenging, with rising costs, and it doesn't look like things are going to change in the future. Maybe you've thought like I have, I wish I'd started investing years ago. My family would be in a better financial position. As they say about trees, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Don't let the benefit of time go to waste on your financial planning for retirement or inheritance for your generations. Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial has been working with us to make the best plan for our family. He's a Christian who works with one of the largest and most trusted financial service companies in the world. He's been helping Lexi and I work towards our financial goals and helps us navigate the complexities of the markets. Whether you have millions in assets or you're just starting to invest, Joe Garrissey can help you reach your goals to grow the kingdom and leave a good legacy for your generations. Visit backwardsplanningfinancial.com. That's backwardsplanningfinancial.com. Or call 615-767-2555 to speak with Joe to prepare for the future. The testimonials presented may not be representative of the experience of other clients and are not a guarantee of future performance or success. Want to start reading the Puritans but don't know where to begin? Puritan Treasures for Today from Reformation Heritage Books makes the riches of these godly writers of old accessible for the modern reader. With updated language and helpful introductions, these classic works from John Owens, Jeremiah Burroughs, and more are the perfect starting point for the curious reader. Learn more about the Puritan Treasures for Today at heritagebooks.org/Puritan Treasures and use code Bright Hearth for 10% off your order. That's Bright Hearth, all lowercase, no spaces, for 10% off your order. This is one of those areas where I know I've gotten in trouble before in the past, but there's almost no way of saying this in a way that can't have the potential to hurt somebody's feelings. And I genuinely have, when I've tried to talk about this pastorally or in a sermon, or where it comes up in application of a sermon. And it is the issue of weight. When we think about our physical health and obesity in America today, with just how rampant obesity is and how it's growing more and more of really like a nuclear bomb of health crisis in America. Temperance is one of those virtues that is especially demanded of us in this time. I've gotten in trouble particularly, though, for saying that generally speaking, Christians, if we're walking in the Spirit consistently and not giving way to the desires of the flesh consistently, we shouldn't be a morbidly obese people. We shouldn't be, known for being, wow, those Christians, they're just real fat. They're wildly overweight. I think about in marriage, one of the gifts that you can give to your spouse is taking care of your body and being temperate in the way that you eat, the way that you give way to idleness.
Yeah, the use of your time again.
Back to the use of your time. And how often we actually end up robbing. Think of how many people we rob through the intemperate use of food and idleness. When it comes to something like obesity and being overweight, you're robbing your spouse of, a physically attractive spouse. The more, just to put it frankly, the more it's not attractive to be 100 pounds overweight, and you're robbing your spouse. You're robbing your children in terms of longevity, that you're going to be there for their grandchildren. You're going to be able to engage in all of the duties that you have through your life. You're robbing your, all of your work is sapped by ill health and those kinds of things.
You've made the distinction, too, between somebody who's obviously overweight but able to do all of their duties versus somebody who is overweight and it is a genuine problem in their life.
Yeah.
Causing health issue after health issue after health issue.
And also a distinction between different stages of life, age, things like that, where I'm not going to speak the same way to a 70-year-old woman or man about hey, whoa, why is your BMI not below 10%?
Yeah, exactly.
A woman is different from a man. She needs to have obviously more fat than a man does. That kind of thing is obviously true. Where I've run into trouble is in, and I think this is kind of, there's a part of this objection that is true, and I don't want to be cruel. And then there's also part of it that we can use as a cover. And it's sort of the objection of our environment and how the food system and things like that, where we go, hormone health is so jacked up in our nation today. Our food system and our medical system is so messed up today. And these things all do factor into the overall health and weight and things like that of Americans. However, this is the thing that I think is important to confront. Take away all of our excuses and just admit that it's not just that all of us have our genetics or our hormone health is just totally out of our control, or all of these things are totally out of control. And there's no way that I could be temperate with that it really has nothing to do with how I eat.
We're not victims.
we often want to make ourselves victims to excuse ourselves from responsibility. An encouragement that I would have, and this is one, man, this is just a constant fight. Like, I myself am working hard right now to try and get a handle back on being physically active, lifting weights 4 to 5 times a week, like gaining back some of the things that I've let go over the last few years in terms of strength and like gotten away from. And so you see me out in my garage gym sometimes till midnight because that's the time I have, or like
all the cortisol folks are freaking out at you right now.
Yeah, they're all like, what are you doing? And I would just tell them, it's better than not.
No, it is.
Better till midnight than not.
It is. It is.
So I get it. Like I don't have a 6-pack, guys. I'm not over here. Wait, well, I guess I haven't actually posted a shirt. I'm not going to post any shirtless pictures, so I could have pretended like I had one. Dang it. Missed opportunity. I get it. But if we're honest with ourselves, this is the point I'm trying to make. The virtue of temperance, if we apply it to disciplining and restraining ourselves, like Matthew Henry said, with what were the things he listed? With meat,
drink, and other enjoyments.
Meat, drink, and other enjoyments. Let's be honest with ourselves. We'd probably all be in better shape and better able to do our duties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of the way Ecclesiastes uses like the gifts and encourages Christians specifically under the sun, under the SON, to use the gifts he gives us. He tells us to use them to our fullest enjoyment for ourselves and others. Like it's a grace to be able to do that. It's a grace to be able to enjoy God's gifts and use them in the employment towards the good of other people as well. Yep. And I think that can kind of be a reining in of your passions is like, okay, is this just to serve me? Or is this, I remember Charlotte Mason had an encouragement of like, when you're thinking of temperance with food, like if you're tempted to just eat alone all the time and go overboard and be a glutton, just eat those things in company with others.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I'm like, that's a really simple, practical way to put up a boundary for yourself of like, this is communal, this is celebratory, this is pro others. This is not just me. I want this right now.
Yes. And it's embracing voluntary hardship. It's embracing, I'm going to, because we're really talking about desires that are strong. Like the fact that they require temperance on our part, they require self-restraint, where we're taking something that is, for the most part, these are almost all going to be desires that, if properly ordered, can serve us. And they're Correct. From the Lord gave us hunger, and the Lord gave us sexual desire. The Lord gave us all these things. He even gave us desire for times of rest and times of enjoyment and things like that. He gave us desire to socialize and, maybe have a time where you're playing games with your friends, or, maybe it's golf for you, or you like play poker or something like that. What the flesh wants to do is to actually end up ruining ourselves and the object of our desire by intemperance, to where we just like the person who becomes addicted to gambling, the person who neglects all of their duties to go and pursue their hobbies.
I was thinking about this recently. I think I kind of confused a few people on Twitter and maybe made an older lady mad, but I was thinking about how when I was a younger mom, I did everything I could to be out of the house, like all day, every day, because to me, that was the solution to keeping the house clean and having everything under control at home.
Yeah.
And just as you have more kids, as they start to have hobbies in the house, they start to have like things they do outside of the house that they're responsible for. Part of the temperance of time for me was even though I was a full-time stay-at-home mom and had been, it was probably about a decade before I realized, like, Lexi, you have got to train yourself to stay home and take care of this place. And I think that can be a really big, I can just like, because we live in a culture that kind of likes to guilt moms if their kids aren't living outside 24/7, if they're not getting their 1,000 hours outside, I think moms can really neglect being self-controlled and learning how to actually care for their house. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like where you're escaping the difficult duty.
Correct.
With pursuing something that's easier or seems easier to you.
Yes. And it's a good thing. Like, obviously I want my kids running around outside barefoot too, but I really had to realize, like, okay, it's not the end of the world if one day a week we are inside so I can catch up on stuff.
Yep. And that's requiring your children to exercise and learn their own temperance, where
Correct.
they're not you're not just creating an environment where your children are endlessly pursuing their desires and interests.
Parented by the trees, so you don't have to break up a fight.
100%. Like, this is a movement. We have a movement. There's ditches on both sides of the road, but we have a movement some of the time where parents are basically saying, what it means to work with the grain of my child is actually to let them pursue their interests and desires all the time.
Yeah, no.
It's like, no, that's not what it means. Working with the grain of the child means, understanding who your kid is, how they were wired, not being trying to force them into a mold that is inhuman for their age and stage of development. But at every stage of development, we need to learn to restrain our desires and move them towards temperance. In fact, this is one of the key concepts behind temperance itself as a virtue, is not just restraint all the time, but it's actually restraint that would train our desires to be ordered. So a truly temperate man, if you could picture it this way, a truly temperate woman, a truly temperate man would be a man or a woman who through training had molded their own desires so that they are doing what they want, and what they want is righteous. They desire the ordered use of food, the ordered use of sex, the ordered use of pleasure.
I know she got it from somewhere else, but it was one of the biggest things that helped me from Misty was learning to love what must be done.
Yes, that's such a good little phrase. I think of that phrase all the time.
Yeah.
Learning to love what must be done. So your goal isn't, as a homemaker, think about it like this, and with physical health and what we talked about, your goal isn't to just plug your nose and do your duties, grit your teeth and force yourself all the time. There's going to be some restraint in making yourself do your duties, but we haven't actually completed the virtue until we've learned to see the glory in the duties God's given us and love them and say, I love serving my husband. I love cherishing my wife. I love nourishing my children. Like, these are all things, like, when you see the glory in those over against the shimmering but ultimately mirage glory of self-service. Oh, but if I didn't do that, then I could go have some more me time, or I could pursue the thing I want to do. Same with food and with exercise. It's like, when you get the rhythm down, at first it takes a great deal of self-restraint to be like, I'm going to go and not eat this. I'm going to stop eating this thing that I really like to eat as much as I want to all the time. And I'm going to restrict myself to a wise diet, and I'm going to say, I'm going to get my gram, 3/4 of a gram to gram of protein per body pound. I'm going to get per pound of body weight. I'm going to get my exercise today. I'm not going to exceed my caloric intake. I'm going to take the time to track my inputs and make sure I'm getting the things that I need for my stage of life. And that's different if you're pregnant or if you're like, there's all kinds of variables. But I'm going to do that. And what happens as you do that is genuinely, you do come to love the virtue. And you're like, I can do hard things. There's been a few things even that theologians, that Summer Yeager's posted about this over the last like a year or so that I've seen on Twitter, where she's talked a lot about addressing fitness and eating with women, and how many of them start with the mindset of like, well, it's all this, it's all that, it's all this external thing. But then like every one of them that actually buckles down, this is true for men too, and says like, I'm going to learn how to discipline. I'm going to learn the wisdom needed. I'm going to learn to discipline. I'm going to learn temperance. I'm going to learn how to like do basic workout stuff, like not becoming a gym rat, but just I'm going to learn that basic stuff. All of them see results. Like that's the power of temperance. And then what you find is that you look back at the old habit that you had put off of gluttony or of sloth, and you realize like, why was I doing that? That was miserable. Why was I letting myself do that?
Yeah, I think part of it is maybe just embarrassment of lack of knowledge, or embarrassment of admitting you need some work.
It's hard to start things
like
that you don't do.
What other area if you say you're on a diet, you're automatically admitting you need some help. But there's not really any other area where you do that, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's just genuinely hard to start something new when you're like, I don't know how to do barbell training. I don't know how to do strength training. I don't know how to do diet. And now I've got to like everybody on the internet's an expert and they're all going to tell me different things. Yeah, and I don't want to ask my friends because it's embarrassing.
It is genuinely overwhelming.
Totally. I get 100% agree.
It is, which is why I think you have to go about it with prayer and wise advice from Christians that you've seen do things well and that have been successful at it, not just, I don't know.
You should,
what?
I think you should do an In the Kitchen on Trim Healthy Mama. Because you've talked about it a lot lately, and it's so nuts and bolts and practical that I don't know if it would like make sense here, but it'd be a good In the Kitchen. What do you think?
I think,
or like related stuff.
Yeah, they've made some course corrections over the last couple years.
Yeah,
that have made me more like, okay, I think people can be all in with this sort of a thing, if that makes sense. But why does that relate?
That's why I think it'd be helpful too, because you're not like. So many, like, it's so tempting to go like whole hog on one thing. Like a carnivore fixes everything. This fixes everything. That fixes everything.
Well, I mean, I was telling you this.
Yeah.
I am the opposite, where I've had to learn to eat
vegetables and like not meat.
Just eat at all, like enough food.
Yes.
So for me, it actually is helpful to think through food in a structure, or else I've noticed the times when I'm like trying to figure things out or I'm in between, I just stop eating, which isn't good either. I mean, obviously I ultimately have a meal, but I actually do better, fuel myself better. I am self-controlled in actually eating food to help my family when I can think through a structure well, and something like Trim Healthy Mama has helped me do that. So
yeah, so we'll maybe Lexi will do one of those In the Kitchens, our little Patreon thing Lexi does that we do like every week or two. We put it up there. There's like 60 or 70 of them plus.
The brewer diet is the other thing the brewer diet is actually what first got me rethinking a lot of the pro-metabolic stuff. And then it just made me kind of go like, oh, well, my midwife too was like, hey, Lexi, try a vegetable.
And you were like, vegetables?
No, I knew like after my last pregnancy, I've been very like hands open with advice that I'm hearing from other people. So I knew she was probably right. I like the structure. I want to know why. So that's what I was trying to figure out, is like, well, why? You
get in all these things, talking to people like in your circle that are doing well with it, go ask them what they're doing. And if they want to help you think through something, 9 times out of 10, people will be happy to do that and be super helpful.
Yeah.
So another area of temperance. So we talked a lot about diet, meat, drink, and what was the other one?
Other enjoyments.
So it kind of flows out. I do think that an important one is restraint, the self-restraint that comes with practicing mercy and forgiveness.
Yeah.
This is a really difficult one when you have been sinned against. So when you're a husband and your wife has sinned against you, or when you're a wife and your husband has sinned against you, or when your parent and your child has sinned against you, maybe your grown parents have sinned against you, someone sins against you, and there's right there a huge temptation towards intemperance. And this is something that's addressed over and over in Scripture, is this Christian duty to forgive, Christian duty to show mercy, Christian duty to consider what God has, how God has treated us, and then to treat other people with that same measure. So this is another fruitful area, I think, where in the home, in terms of Christian homemaking and productive Christian household for husbands and for wives, we need to be thinking about temperance when it comes to wrath and exacting of justice and things like this.
I was thinking about this on Sunday morning with the kids, like going to confession of sin. The Westminster Confession, chapter 18, on the assurance of grace and salvation, puts these verses together in Ephesians 4:30 and 31. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, whereby ye are sealed unto the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you. I don't know why, but the Westminster pairing those together really showed me like your lack of forgiveness grieves the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
So if it grieves the Holy Spirit, why is this such a big deal for you to hold on to it and not overlook this tiny thing? Like, it's a way bigger deal that you're grieving the Holy Spirit than trying to, have the sternest face possible to make the toddler understand the spill on the floor was a really bad thing.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like it showed me like the self-control in it was just like, let go.
Yes.
Like, does God not have this? Will he not mature them over time? You are being so petty.
Yes. And if it's very true in small things, and also in serious and big things too, where someone's genuinely sinned against you and you have a right to and I'm speaking in terms of just the law. Before the law, you have a right to justice, where they owe you something. They're in your debt. They really have sinned against you. They really have stolen something from you. They really have harmed you. They've really failed in some duty that they had to you. And when a brother or sister comes to you in that circumstance, whether in the house or out, but I'm thinking of how important this is in marriages, and they recognize the sin and confess it and turn from it, we have such a temptation there to want to deal with the other person in a way wholly different from how the Lord actually does treat us and how we definitely want the Lord to treat us. Where all of a sudden, all of our virtues and all of my greatness rises in my mind, and I'm thinking of how righteous I am and how unrighteous this other person is in front of me, my husband, my wife, my kid, whatever it is. And yet the Lord teaches us over and over to pray that we would be forgiven as we forgive, and that we would use the measure with others, even in terms of mercy, that we want to receive. And so I think there is even like in Micah 6, he talks about loving mercy, like actually loving mercy. And that's, if you think about that, that's really difficult to do. We love receiving mercy, but loving to give mercy, that is the sign of you have ordered desires, where you have a desire for justice, because mercy isn't about forgetting about justice. But when you love mercy, Christian mercy, not just generic Walmart brand mercy that has nothing to do with the law, but when you recognize the mechanics of the gospel, that God in Christ has forgiven us, he's taken our record of debt, he's put it on the cross with Christ, he's nailed it there, it's died with Christ, that has no more claim on us because God has cleared our debt, and he's imputed to us the righteousness of Christ as our covering. And when all of that has happened, and then somebody sins against you and you're working through the mechanics of forgiveness with them, you will know that you have temperance in this area when you love mercy, when you actually delight to give out mercy. And it pleases you to think you're forgiven. Like, oh, this person who sinned against me in a way that hurt me, I am so thankful and glad that they're forgiven and we can be at peace with each other. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to be destroyed because of this sin that they committed because of mercy. Yeah, I love mercy.
The person who's willing to forgive understands that it's to their glory. Like it is to their benefit. It's for their good long term to let go of that as well.
Yes. You learn to love mercy the more mature you get in your Christian walk, in your Christian faith, because you realize that mercy, and that it's God's mercy and his patience and his long suffering and his forgiveness and his grace that leads us to become mature men and women. And so when you see somebody else receive mercy, and when you particularly even give out mercy to somebody who you could give wrath to, you learn to love it, because that will make that person, the object of the mercy, mature over time. That is an actual influence in their own righteousness. Mm-hmm. It's going to grow them in a way that if you just belittled them or raged against them or held it against them forever, or brought up the sin over and over and over from the past that's already been dealt with, it's already gone, that's not actually going to mature people. That's actually not going to lead to open hearts and the glory and joy of Christian fellowship. That's going to lead to bitterness over time in your house. So if you're doing that in your marriage or with your kids, you really need to repent of it and practice the temperance of restraint in your spirit at the demand for personal justice and vengeance, and instead learn to love mercy and extend Christian forgiveness freely as actually a means of grace towards that person. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about another area of temperance, because he talks about drink, and this is actually, I think, very important in our day. for people to think through, because it's, as with all pendulum swings, you're always, we had a lot of, like, in my generation, the thing to reject was like teetotalism and forced sobriety statements, where people were like, we grew up good Baptists. So it was like, very skeptical of alcohol, and like had alcoholism and drunkenness in my family. And so there's and in Calvary Chapel as well, which was a big part of our theological
alcoholism and
upbringing.
drunkenness.
There was a huge tendency towards teetotaling, where it was like, to go to certain Bible colleges or things like that, you'd have to sign a statement.
To be a leader, you had to sign it.
You didn't drink, and they didn't use wine in communion, and they said that it was grape. Chuck Smith would say that it was just grape juice, and like, which is not nonsense. But so that was one thing. But in kind of like our maturing, the pendulum in our circles has swung all the way towards being very free with alcoholic. We're talking about drinking alcohol, if you didn't understand. Like, we're not talking about drinking raw milk, but which you should do. So, yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen the pendulum just move all the way the other way, to where it's like, we should probably actually talk about this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk about temperance with drink.
Yeah, I've had friends in different seasons, like, definitely say, this is just not a season. I'm not handling stress well, and I know this is a temptation for me. I'm not drinking right now. Or, we'll put limits on, not this time of the day. There's no reason for me to be drinking at that time of the day, or every day at that time of the day,
Yeah, like if you're mixing yourself an old fashioned after feeding a toddler at 9 a.m. by yourself, ladies, sign. Like, that's a bad sign. You don't want to be doing.
Yeah.
No, and that's a good point, is that we need to read the season that we're in, and also, I think just be with something like alcohol, which God gave wine to gladden the hearts of men. It's a good thing that, and like all good things, when it's perverted, it becomes a horror. Mm-hmm. So we ought to be doing, especially if you drink regularly, you need to be doing regular self-assessment of just, am I enslaved to this? Is it becoming a crutch or a habit? Is it becoming something I need instead of something that I thank the Lord for, enjoy, have a glass of wine? Like, am I getting to the point where I'm having multiple drinks in a row on a regular basis, and that's just becoming a normal feature of my life?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a Christian struggling to find companies that align with your values and beliefs? Squirrelly Joe's has you covered for all your coffee needs. All their coffee is hand-selected and roasted fresh every day by a family of fellow believers. Try them out, and you'll savor exceptional coffee while knowing that your investment supports a company committed to following God's teachings and upholding truth and righteousness, ensuring your hard-earned money contributes to the growth of God's kingdom. Stop giving your hard-earned dollars to pagans who support evil. We have a fantastic offer for our listeners. Your first bag of coffee is free. All you have to do is cover the shipping. So head over to squirrellyjoes.com/bright, that link's in the description, to claim your free bag of coffee. Here at Bright Hearth, we're all about helping you not turn into a girl if you're a boy, or into a boy if you're a girl. You know what might be doing that to you? The soap in your shower. So we are pleased to introduce you to IndigoSundrySoap.com, link in the description, of course, who can provide you with soaps and more without any of the nasty stuff. And because they love you, they're giving you a discount code, guys. So use code, all caps, Bright Hearth, for 10% off your whole order. Support this great Christian company and support Bright Hearth Podcast at the same time. Check them out at IndigoSundrySoap.com. And of course, that link is in the description. Here at Bright Hearth, we love to support Christian family businesses that are doing great work, which is why we're so happy to commend to you A Well-Worn Story. A Well-Worn Story is a sewing studio based in New Glarus, Wisconsin, and they're making handcrafted leather and canvas goods. It's run by a husband and wife team, and they focus on making beautiful products from natural, high-quality materials that only get better with age, telling your unique story. Made in rural America, this Christian family business makes high-quality handcrafted leather and canvas bags, belts, and wallets, and these are heirloom quality. stuff that you can hand down to your next generation. You can order online at www.awellwornstory.com and use the discount code Bright Hearth, all caps, no spaces, to save 10% on any order. Looking for a gift that will last 1,000 generations? Check out RootedPinesHomestead.com, where they work together as a family economy to create natural wooden toys and herbal remedies. Coated with only coconut oil and beeswax, their toys are safe enough for the mouths of babes. Use code BRIGHTHEARTH, all caps, at checkout for 10% off your order. Link in the show notes below. Something happened when I turned 32. It was right around there.
I know you're no fun.
I just feel terrible when I drink much at all. So most of the time I decline. Like today, someone was like, "Hey, do you want to? We're gonna sit and talk about this thing." And occasionally we'll make old fashions at the office. And I was like, "No, I don't.
No thanks.
I don't want one." So I hardly ever drink anymore, and I never did a lot.
No, you never
did the excess. Never did a lot, but I just don't want it anymore because it makes me feel terrible. Other than like wine at communion and that kind of thing, or the
communion wine
drink.
Was really good this week. Actually,
really?
Yeah, it was great. I was like, "Who were you there this week?"
I was
gone. You weren't there this week.
Gone.
Dang it! It was yummy.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go.
Carl still
figure
making
out,
it?
Yeah, maybe Carl made it.
Okay,
that'd be funny. But I do think that this can be an issue, and that we need to not act too cool for the question.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
We're doing.
I do know. This is a cultural thing. You have to be the person that. Yeah. No. It definitely. Yep.
Yeah. So don't give into that. Like, we're just super cool, so we have 5 to 7 drinks in a sitting regularly, and it's fine. It's cool. It's actually, you might be getting into drunkenness. So we need to be temperate in the way that we enjoy drink, and making sure that we don't validate everything the teetotalers said about us all along. They're like, well,
Yeah, and I think as women, like you, we didn't drink a lot when I was first legal. I was also pregnant all the time, though that's a different question. I'm somewhat okay with some alcohol in pregnancy. I got to a point a couple years ago where it was like, oh, I see where you go from, and maybe part of it was you defining it for me. Like drunkenness scripturally is being controlled by the alcohol in your body versus being controlled by the spirit.
Yeah.
Like you said this to me, like you can't trust an alcoholic person. There's a reason, we don't let alcoholic Uncle so-and-so come around the kids, because you just can't trust them. You don't know what they're going to do. They're not filled with the spirit. And that helped me like translate it into like a self-assessment, I guess, of like, oh, are you being too loose with your tongue because you had 2 glasses of wine with your girlfriends? Are you suddenly being disrespectful to your husband because you had a glass of wine? Like that's where it's going to be different for each person, but you have to be able to put up, I don't personally want a loose tongue. So I have a boundary, when I feel that, that's it. And the thing about it is like, when you have those boundaries, you're going to be more self-controlled about it. Like you're probably not going to need 4 or 5 drinks. You're going to understand 1 is literally enough. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Because that's the problem, is that the warning is because drunkenness is essentially, it's like hiring somebody to help you sin. It's like you're getting controlled by something else, or it's and what it's really doing is it's loosening your inhibition.
Yes.
To where your restraint and your self-control and your wisdom is no longer in the driver's seat, and you're just giving way to the desires of the flesh, or the every word that that would be fun to talk about. Maybe I could say that. It's like, huh. So instead of letting wine gladden your heart, you've allowed wine to become a mocker and a brawler.
Yeah.
And you've made it. You've given full vent to your spirit, and you've just become a fool. And so, and I really think that the too cool thing can be a genuine problem, where we're like, we're not like those teetotalers. And then, okay, but don't prove them right on everything they ever said. So I do think this is an issue. For some of you, you're like, this is not an issue at all. I've never even been tempted. And some of you know what I'm talking about and have this in your family. And I certainly have in my family drunkenness. It's
not our family,
not the immediate family. I mean, like the broad family. To be clear, yeah, like
you looked at me,
man.
I certainly have this.
They don't see it.
I know.
I look
it
over.
was just funny the way you
it.
said it.
Yeah, Lexi really, she's hitting the sauce all the time. All the time. No, not really. Hardly ever at all is she drinking anything. But both sides of our family have
port weather again, though.
It's true. There are a few things she really likes.
I like
port being one of them.
Not Robitussin, by the way. Good port, not Robitussin.
Apparently, some port is just Robitussin to you.
Ugh.
I like a good Scotch. I like a
Not
good.
Really, you don't like anything. Well, what did I make you recently? You were like,
Scotch.
"Oh yeah, I'll have one of those."
I love a good old fashioned. I love a good Scotch. They make me feel terrible.
What did I just make?
They taste good.
Oh, that cocktail. That's the fall cocktail.
The Golden Snitch.
Oh yeah, the Golden Snitch. I love that one. Yeah,
That's
the Golden
right.
Snitch.
It's pretty good.
Half-Baked Harvest. There you go, guys.
Speaking of drunkenness, let's talk about the last category of temperance,
Okay.
which is, well, they are related because when you're drunk, this one gets worse, and it is the tongue. Like temperance in speech, temperance in how you deploy your words and your tongue. We're both like, ugh. This one.
Just go memorize the entire book of James.
Yeah, that'd be a good start.
Literally.
And the Proverbs.
James will do it.
Yeah, what do you got? Hit us.
Well, just like every verse I'm looking at, James 1:26. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. For in many things we all offend. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. I think that's a good one because it shows, it reflects everywhere, like lack of self-control. Because controlling the tongue, this verse seems to point out, gives some sort of mastery to the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
This should be something we should all be striving after, is discretion of speech.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying that if you can ski down a double black diamond, you can ski down a green, whatever, a green and a green, what is it? Green square?
What?
Ski runs.
I know. I don't know.
Blue, like a blue run, a green run. Okay, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I grew up in Utah. So you ski or snowboard, the runs go from like yellow, which is easy, beginner, then like blue, and then green. I might have my blue and my green switched up. And there's like black diamond, which is hard. And then there's double black diamond, which is like you go to the top of the mountain. And when you're going down one of these, like it's crazy. You're just pointing sometimes you're going down like a chute between that where the mountains funnel into like a chute, and you can't turn because it's so narrow, and you just have cliffs. Like this is.
I don't know if I've been on a double. I've been on lots of blacks. I'm not scared of blacks, but I don't know if I've been on it.
I think we're gonna have to edit that out. I'm not scared of blacks. Okay,
this is not helpful.
Keep it.
This is not helpful.
I think the verse is getting at. It's like saying taming the tongue is so difficult. If you can do that, you can be self-controlled in anything. Like you could do you could do anything, and that is 100% true. Like I know it's in the Bible, so I know that it's true. But I mean experientially, like that.
Yeah,
we know that is true.
I'm serious though. If you guys if you're a hot-headed woman, you need to go memorize the book of James and read Meekness by Matthew Henry over and over and over again. And I'm not kidding you.
The quest for meekness and quietness of spirit, is that what it is?
I don't know. You always say the whole thing, and I just know it as meekness.
It's the Meekness book, but it's Matthew Henry. It's an exposition of 1 Peter 3, or it's a meditation on the gentle and quiet spirit passage in 1 Peter. And he's just going through relentlessly, like what it means to have a gentle and quiet spirit and be meek. Mm-hmm. So give me some examples. What are some situations where intemperateness of speech is going to tempt the wife at home, homemaker?
Unreasonable children. She'll just like give in to arguing with them when really she should be like directing and setting the tone instead of letting them set the tone. She, succumbs, lowers herself, becomes immature.
So she says like, go get ready for bed.
Yeah.
And they start arguing,
I think,
and she gives in.
Yeah. And it becomes like, that's how you provoke your children.
And then she starts arguing with them back and forth. Like the case for why you should go to bed.
Correct.
Instead of just saying...
Instead of using her authority, saying, no, I am an authority. You don't get to argue. You need to obey mom.
You don't get to give me a case for why you don't go to bed. Go to bed.
So I think that's an example. I think if a wife feels like she's intellectually superior to a man, like it's so easy at that point to volley back and forth with an argument instead of just being like I literally, you're never wrong. But I literally tell myself, like, who cares, Lexi? Get over it. We're not going to argue about this tonight.
Like if you think I'm wrong.
You're right. He's wrong, but who cares? Like I just move on. And I've done that since we were young. I don't know why. I just respect you. I think that I don't care. I'm not going to cause a fight about it. We're just going to keep moving. But it's not, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am really disrespectful.
No, you're not. I'm getting a window into the apparatus of your respect.
It's just not worth it to me. Part of it is just like, it's tiring. I'd rather just be his friend.
What's the point?
Yeah. But you also just have to know, like, shut it down. This is not going to help. And again, the book of James, unrighteous anger does not produce a righteousness of man. Like, understanding, again, it's not a tool in your tool belt as a mother or as a wife.
Yeah, that verse, it's even stronger. I think he says, the anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness God requires. He doesn't even qualify it that he's talking only about unrighteous anger. And I've always taken that verse to mean that even righteous anger, because there's unrighteous anger is just unrighteous, but there's also righteous anger. Like you're mad about something that you can be mad about. God is righteously angry at times, or towards sin and that sort of thing. But for us, apparently anger by itself won't produce righteousness, which means that even when we're righteously angry, we have to turn it to like a righteous action. We can't just sit there in the anger. It won't do anything. It won't accomplish righteousness. We have to turn it to prayer. We have to turn it to action, or we have to turn it to covering a defense or something else other than the anger.
Which is why I said what I did earlier about not grieving the Spirit, but being willing to forgive quickly.
Yes.
Like you have to ask yourself the question of, where was it? Jonah? No, not Jonah. The plant. Do you do well to be angry?
Yes.
What am I thinking
You're
of?
talking. No, you are talking about Jonah.
Is it Jonah? Okay.
Yeah, Jonah and the whale, and he
Jonah
goes to
and the
Nineveh,
whale. Yes.
and then he comes. God gives mercy to all of them.
Yes.
And he has a bad eye, and he's mad, and he's sitting in his plant, and then the plant gets eaten by a worm, and he's all ticked.
Yeah, and you have to ask yourself: do I do well to smart off at my husband? Do I do well to stay up to 2 a.m. arguing about this? No. Do I do well to stir up strife in my children by provoking them to wrath?
No. Is
it helping anyone? Because what can happen in that moment is you're like, you so bad. It really isn't. A lot of the times, at least for me, sometimes it's not genuinely because I want to be served better. It's I'm bucking up against my lack of wisdom and not knowing what else to do. Mm-hmm. And so the flesh starts grasping for straws like, well, let's try to be angrier about it. Maybe they'll understand then.
Yeah.
And it's really just like, it's taking it all too seriously because we don't actually believe the grace is sufficient. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of just saying.
So there's not as much levity involved in the forgiveness.
Yeah. Like, here's the tools God gave me. He said to do this. He said to do this. He said to do this. Be self-controlled, cover the offense, forgive quickly. He said all of that. But that doesn't really seem like it's a big enough gun right now. Exactly. I need a bigger gun.
Not going to work fast enough.
I need anger and sarcasm and bitterness and cynicism and being rude and argumentativeness. And I know he said that I need to have a gentle and quiet spirit, and like Sarah called her husband Lord, and that was great. But right now what I feel like doing is actually calling him an idiot and arguing with him. And on the husband's side, it's the same temptation just filtered through his duties and his vocation. Intemperance of speech in men is an equal temptation where he can be tempted.
Calling things gay all the time is intemperate, by the way. Just saying.
Yeah, like
just throwing that out there. Quit saying it's gay all the time.
Yeah, this is a conversation we've had to have with like St. Brendan's young men at the school.
It is obnoxious.
Or any of them, they'll hear us call something gay or say like, we need to recover the stomach to say that stuff is gay. And that's 100% true. We need to like poke the idols of the day in both eyes. But not everything should be like, it's not the rhetorical weapon to pull out at all circumstances.
Yeah.
Because it does. It loses its effectiveness. So it's like part of wisdom. But for men, I think when you think about temperance of speech, it's like, okay, for the wife, God says, do you have a gentle and quiet spirit? And to the husband, it's like, are you being harsh with your wife? Are you treating her as the weaker vessel? Are you being overly like bombastic? Are you being overly harsh with her? Are you being overly direct with her? And not like the kind directness of just speaking plainly, but like, are you treating her sort of like you would a foreman in your auto shop, or like a sergeant in your company that's under your command? Because those are different things. Your wife is a different type of creature than that. Are you being temperate with your children in the way that your tone and the way that you're talking? And it's like convicting whenever we talk about this, because there's a million ways that we all sin in this. You realize really quickly, like James is telling the truth when he says, if you could bridle this, you'd be sinless. Because he says that at one point. If a man could tame his tongue, he would be without sin. Like, because this is how thoroughgoing this issue is for all of us. Yeah. The goal needs to be that we can be honest with ourselves about, oh, this is where I've been sinning.
There is a verse, right? Out of the
abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yes. Okay. I wasn't just making that up.
Jesus says that out of the. It is that, and that's to James's point. What it's doing is it's revealing the junk that's in our heart towards where you're frustrated with your wife, and so you're harsh towards her, or you're raising your voice at her, you're getting frustrated with her, or you're annoyed with your children because you really just want to like serve yourself, and here they are being needy, and so you're frustrated with them. And you're harsh towards them. And men fall in this ditch all the time. I fall in this ditch. This is a ditch that we have to keep a watch for. And the wife says, I don't want to have a gentle and quiet spirit. I want to punch my husband in the mouth verbally. So there was something you said earlier that I'm trying to remember what it was. That was the lie with all this is that if I give way to sin and intemperance of speech, that will be the thing that gets it done, that gets things done.
Yeah.
And when we learn how to love the virtue, again, because temperance ultimately isn't just about self-control, it's actually more than that. It's about our desires being shaped temperately.
Yes.
So that I no longer desire, I'm not always having to go, man, I really want to yell and scream at everybody, and I'm going to have self-control, which is good.
Yes.
But it's actually having your desires go, I don't want to yell and scream.
In reality, you have to, like, something I've been having to tell myself, especially since you've been traveling so much, is like, I want this to be a joyful, peaceful time where I'm not exhausted. I don't feel guilty the whole time because I've been losing my cool. So what that means is I'm learning to love a house that's not as picked up right now.
Yep.
And that's like, I'm literally telling myself, like, I love that I got to sit and play with the kids on the floor today and the living room hasn't been picked up in days.
Yep.
And that's me trading one affection for another, because that's what does start to happen is you're guarding your affections, you're guarding your clean house, you're guarding your me time or whatever, I don't know, your image to your friends or whatever, and you're going to protect that fiercely. And if the child looks like the enemy, well, they're going to be treated like the enemy.
Yes.
So
the goal in all of this, to summarize, to put a bow on it, is we're trying to use self-control to get us to temperance. Self-control, I think Aristotle had an analogy here, because there's a subtle distinction between self-control and temperance, where a temperate person has trained their desires towards wisdom and righteousness. They actually want good things. Self-control is that restraint. Self-control is a part of temperance, but it's like when you want to do something bad and your self-control kicks in, it restrains you. So the analogy that Aristotle uses is that an intemperate person is like a city with that has unjust laws. And
okay, yeah, that's good.
Because they don't actually have
the right desires,
the right framework of desire.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the person without self-control is like a city that has righteous laws, but they don't obey them.
Yes.
So you can fail in self-control where you really know all of the things you should be doing and you just don't do them. So you're failing to control yourself. Temperance, though, ultimately is learning to temper your desires, to bring them into accord with wisdom and righteousness. So our goal needs to be, in developing temperance and thinking about all these areas, is loving to eat with wisdom and control our bodies with wisdom and drink with wisdom and enjoy good things with wisdom. Temperance is, for the homemaker, is learning to, and the wife and the mother, is learning to love having a gentle and quiet spirit towards her husband. Man, I love not arguing with my husband. I love respecting him.
Try it for a day.
I love honoring my husband. I love using my words to build him up. I love flirting with my husband. These are all good suggestions. For the husband, it's like, I don't just have to grit my teeth and hold back from pouring out the harsh words that are in my heart. It's learning to love being gentle with your wife. It's learning to love to cherish your wife, learning to love not to provoke your children to wrath, but to have fun with them and be a good disciplinarian, but also being a kind father they love to be with, who can laugh with his kids. And so this is the beauty of temperance. It's an ordered soul, an ordered spirit that is disciplined and shaped and formed by the firm, fixed foundation of God's word that we grow against, even if it's painful at first, but then we grow into the mold of it and we learn to love it and we're shaped by it and we see the wisdom in it and the joy in it. And ultimately the law has our heart and is written on our heart because we actually desire to do it. We see the glory in it. And when we arrive there with our words and our deeds, then we will have become temperate men and women. We will also be glorified at that point when it's perfect. But in the meantime, we're being sanctified. And so we'll leave you with that. Festina lente, make haste slowly towards all of these glorious and good ends.
This is not the King's Hall.
I know, but Festina lente it's my thing. I wrote that on our family crest before I ever gave it to the King's Hall. I know you did. King's Hall doesn't get to own it. Wink it, quiso wink it. He conquers who conquers himself. We got another one, Pro Christo et Patri.
We got another one?
For the school. Which is like,
what does that
for
mean?
Christ.
We got another one, though.
We claimed it.
Okay.
We put it on a crest for the school. For Christ and fatherland or people, nation. For our people. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. If you like the show and you want to support the work we do here at Bright Hearth, you can jump on board our Patreon channel, and we do a lot of stuff there too. So we have the In the Kitchen that we're putting out every week or two. That's just a short patron exclusive, usually very nuts and bolts practical look at one focused thing each episode. And so last week, what was the last one you sent that you did? It was on like budgeting and groceries and growing families and like that practical. And so I said in this episode that we needed to have you do one on something. Okay. Now I'm trying to remember what it was.
It was True Healthy Mama and stuff.
Yeah. So maybe I can talk Lexi and do an In the Kitchen on that too. And but there's like 60, 70 plus episodes of this up there at that point. If you like the show and want to support it, that's the best way to do it. You can chip in a couple bucks a month.
And listen, guys, the reason I stopped the Roger Scruton book was because I did not preview the book before starting it. And there is a whole chapter with nude art in it. So
you're not going to do a nude art chapter.
I got to that. I read the chapter. I had no problem reading the chapter and going on. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know how other people would feel about it.
Just open it and say, look,
stopped.
We're going to do 2 chapters today. The first one is on nude art. Don't. Okay. Scruton wasn't a Christian. And then the next chapter was on...
Well,
was he?
He was.
Oh, I didn't think he was.
He just didn't fall in the same camp as you fall in regards to that. No, but that was part of it, too, is I was like, well... For some reason, I should have previewed this.
I might have it wrong. I just thought he wasn't a Christian at all. Is he Roman Catholic?
He's a...
Eastern Orthodox?
Church of England.
He's Anglican?
Anglican, yeah.
Anglicans are Christians.
That's why I said he was a Christian.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
You said he wasn't.
I thought he wasn't.
No, he was.
Dang, I've been misled on this.
What? Where did you hear that?
I asked someone, and I'm trying to remember who it was. I was like, is Roger Scruton a Christian?
I don't know. I was
no. Maybe
researching and investigating, and just because there's some stuff in that book on beauty that I'm like, you are too spot on with this to not be a Christian. And so it did make me do more digging. So sorry, I didn't mean to derail us, but I just wanted to say
okay.
I didn't like totally give up. I kind of did though.
She's done. So Lexi's gone through some chapters on Roger Scruton's book on beauty. We're going to do a 2-chapter one the next time it picks up. The first one's going to be on nude art and just say don't, and then the next one.
Okay, there you go.
So just to get ahead of the rumors, Bright Hearth is not.
Yes, I didn't know how you wanted me to proceed,
doing
so
a bunch
I just
of like
stopped.
we're not into nudity. Like we're not into it. We're not into public
This
nudity.
is how
Don't
we
do
roll.
it. Sometimes my little Alfred, he's at the stage where he loves to take his diaper off and streak throughout the neighborhood or something. That's not what I'm talking about here. But
No.
it's been a good episode, guys. I'm going to practice the Virtue of Temperance in my speech now and stop talking. Walk away from this episode. Guys, we'll catch you next time on Bright Hearth. Lord bless you until then. And yes, Festina Lente. Make haste slowly.